I'd like to welcome you to the Nicholas County Board of Education. Today is Friday, June 9th, and today we have a special work session scheduled. And at this time, if you'll stand for a moment of silent reflection. Thank you. Please join the board with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so today we're having a work session on construction planning, and this is how we got to where we are. Last week we had a meeting with FEMA, and of course we presented to FEMA that we were short on money, 72 million short. And so we want to know what our options were. We have been to the governor's office, we've been to SBA, there's been some business leaders out of Summersville that's been to the governor's office. And anyway, we've begged, pleaded, whatever you want to say, to try to get some more money. And our answer's been no, they're not giving us any more money. So, I said all along that I would follow the mediated agreement, that this board would follow the mediated agreement until we hit a wall, and we've hit that wall. So at this time, we need to come up with some different scenarios of what we could, how we can get around this wall, over this wall, into this wall, however you look at it. Now, the two things that FEMA did tell us in that meeting, and Mr. Moose was present, myself, Dr. Tetrick, the superintendent-to-be was there, Mr. Ferguson was there, and our lawyer, Marissa Nortz, was there. They did tell us two things that could not be changed, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but the two things that we can't change is the money amount. They will not give us more money. They made that clear. And they do not want the location changed where we have started these projects already. Other than that, they said that we could go to them with some other options. So the purpose of this meeting, this is an open board meeting, but it's, of course, it's open for the public to listen, but please don't say anything. At the end, we may have a little bit of time to, if you want to write down a question, we'll see if we can entertain those. But, Mr. Beam, you want to come on up there where you can? So, of course, we have the 5 board members, Dr. Tetrick, who's our current superintendent, and Mr. Beam will be our new superintendent starting July 1. We have Dave Ferguson with ZMM Architects. I should know that. And does everybody know you?
I'm not sure if everybody knows me.
I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Kristen Eckel, work in the finance office.
She's sitting in for Mr. Hess. And of course, our lawyer is Marissa Nortz from Steptoe and Johnson. So,
Chip, can I make one comment on there, just what it is? Dave Ferguson and I are not related. We have the same last name. Just kind of want to make that clear.
You have more hair than him.
Yeah, there's just no conflict.
Yeah,
Just trying to let
right.
you know, there's just no
Right.
conflict there.
now I did have a song I was going to play, but my wife said don't do that. But anyway, it's, I don't know if you've ever heard the song Rumor Mill by the Bill Gaither trio, or band. But there's a lot of rumors out there right now, and you know, the reason we're here is because we're $72 million short. And we've got to do something else. So, we've hit that wall where we have to come up with some different solutions. Now, if we don't get this taken care of today, we can have another meeting. But by the 1st of July, the first meeting in July, we want to have a plan that our new superintendent will look at and say, I recommend we send this to FEMA. And then hopefully by the end of the month, we'll have another meeting with FEMA. So remember, the two things they said we couldn't change is the money amount. They're not giving us any more money. The governor's office said they weren't giving us any money. SBA said they weren't giving us any money. And the site locations, we're stuck with those, which that's fine. We've got a lot of money tied up in those. So, Marissa?
Thanks, Mr. Piron. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Marissa Nortz. I am an environmental and regulatory attorney with Steptoe Johnson, and I've been helping the board with some of the FEMA-related and state-related regulatory issues that we've encountered on this project. The latest of which is this Glade Creek funding issue. So, as Mr. Piron noted, on June 2nd, we had our first meeting with SBA, and there was some officials with FEMA there virtually. That's where it was just discussed that we should, start considering some proposals to present to FEMA. That was on Friday. We were scheduled to meet with them again on a Tuesday with actual representatives from FEMA Region 3. And so we had some ideas floating around, but we did not want to present any kind of actual proposal. So we were able to have a full board working session. So what I have done in preparation for this meeting is kind of try to lay out some session goals for today. Obviously, we all add to that because this is a working session. And so I've got 5 goals plus the draft proposals that we've got currently. Obviously, I think we're going to try to add to those and modify those further. I think our first goal for this session and for FEMA is to confirm with them that any proposal that we submit, that the Cherry River project remains on track and currently conforms to the 428 agreement per the last scope of work change for the project, which was submitted on June 14, 2022 and approved on July 12, 2022. So we want to make it clear that that project is continuing to roll. The second for today, we want to evaluate proposals for alternate construction plans for Glade Creek to conform to our currently available project budget. What I would suggest to this board is that we strive to present multiple proposals to FEMA. That way we get their feedback on multiple different items for consideration. We don't want to submit one proposal and it be a no without any backups. So we want to evaluate everything today and submit it to FEMA. Within the proposals that we're going to discuss, what we need to consider, this board needs to consider, is how the remaining $97 million will be spent. We have approximately $97 million left for the Glade Creek project. The proposal should try to conform to the 428 agreement as much as possible, with the understanding that certain aspects of each proposal will likely fall outside of the original 428 agreement, and that we're going to have to require some FEMA flexibility within those agreements to get this done. Each of our proposals need to detail how long it will take, how long from FEMA approval of the selected proposal to start of construction time. That is FEMA's big goal here, is to know our schedule and to stick us to a schedule. So that's important. Within that construction proposal time period, we want to know if the proposal is going to require amendment to the existing CEFP that we have, and how long it's going to take to amend that CEFP per whatever proposal we're working on. We want to know the total design time for the board to approve of the revised design, and the total project bid time. And then how long from the start of construction until our students are in and using the respective buildings or the respective upgrades that we are able to propose. We also, within our proposals to FEMA, want to make sure that we specifically identify the proposals we are making that we think fall outside of the 428 agreement. That's the one thing we did discuss on Tuesday is, they've asserted that there might be some flexibility within that 428 agreement, I've read it several times. It's pretty straightforward. So we want to identify where we think it falls out of the 428 agreement so we can get their specific approval on those items, because that's what we need here. And then finally, within any proposal submitted to FEMA, the board will need to specifically request the current Glade Creek project milestones be amended to reflect the new timeframes. So that's what I think that this working session, and it might take more than one of these to get through all of this, but that's what I see as the goals. Does the board have any additions to that?
I think we need to list them in order of priority, which we prefer.
So at the start of last week, or started this week, I'm sorry, it's already Friday, we had started to discuss and throw around some ideas for some proposals with the idea that none of these were final, that they were all subject to change, and that whatever we decide to submit to FEMA has to have the full approval of this board. So today's goal is to outline those, come up with as many as we can, let me put together a formal document, and then for this board to approve it before it's submitted. So the first proposal on the list, and I did not list these in order of this board's preference. There is no preference that has been expressed to me as to these projects, so this is just an order of ideas in no specific preference. The first one is a new Summersville Middle School with renovations to the existing CTE Center and existing high school. So within that, what that does is that accomplishes rebuilding the Summersville Middle School that was actually lost in the 2016 flood. For that middle school, our architect has said we'll have 544 students there. It would be approximately 81,056 square feet. It would cost approximately $42,554,400. It would be 1 year from FEMA's approval of that proposal to the start of construction, with 9 months for ZMM to do the redesign, a month for this board to approve the redesign, 6 weeks to bid. Now, I do have a note in here for discussion purposes today is, does this time frame account for amendment to the CEFP? I don't think it does
That's a big going, that will go on concurrently.
with the design.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's just the middle school.
correct.
Just the middle school, that doesn't affect any other schools, or?
It would be just a rebuilding of the middle school with renovations to the existing CTE Center in Craigsville, I believe it's in Craigsville, and the existing high school. So the only thing being built at Glade Creek, per this proposal, would be a new middle school. The remaining money would go towards renovations and upgrades to the existing CTE Center and the existing high school.
I'll say something. The thought process was, I think, with that one, with this proposal, is that you're still spending money within the 428 at the Career Tech Center and the high school. You're not spending money where you originally said you were going to. You're still affecting the vocational piece and the high school, the old high school. Now, that's a stretch, but it's still, I mean, I don't know how FEMA's, we're trying to visualize how FEMA's gonna look at the 428.
Everything's gonna be a stretch, but.
Yeah.
I mean,
And until their lawyers look at it, we won't know.
let me make a comment. I've been doing some thinking on this, and maybe devil's advocate, I may know the answers to it, but I'm still going to bring it up. I don't think there's a specific plan for the renovations that would be at the CTE Center in Craigsville. There's just an amount of money. It's just the amount of money for the existing that would go to Nicholas County High School. I'm not sure really of any renovations or anything that would take that amount of money. So, you know, we're going to have to think about, first of all, we don't want to lose that money to FEMA. So we have to have a plan for that money. I've also been thinking a lot from the standpoint, talking to the superintendent and really talking to some people in the public and some principals and some teachers and just trying to brainstorm a little bit. I am concerned a little bit that the CTE plan delivery makes more sense in a high school, in a comprehensive high school. It makes a lot of sense to deliver those, that VOTEC that way. The problem is, again, money. And if we take out the CTE out of the comprehensive plan at Glade Creek, again, thing outside the box, we're just talking, this is a planning discussion thing. Is there a way, you're going to have room at the Nicholas County High School when those pods are removed, or those temporary housing is removed? And I haven't looked at the Richwood plans, but is there a way, instead of having your CTE, I guess a lot of this will go to our new superintendent when we're talking how you're going to deliver the CTE, you know, the delivery method, because the delivery method that's presently on the table, if that changes, that's going to change the scope of the work and the plans of the high school, quite frankly. And so we're going to have to take all that into consideration. So is there a way to have VOTEC at both schools and not have one at Craigsville? Take the $45 million, figure out what you can deliver. Now, being devil's advocate, I realize that you have the teachers, the manpower, equipment. Those are the things that come into play. Or do you just do certain CTE? I know right now that the CTE, the junior ROTC, and they have a new program, Grow Your Own. Those are under the CTE program. But they're being delivered at the high school, or some, so, you know, some are being delivered at the Career Center anyway. So I guess my concern, and we might not be able to do it, I buy into the fact that students, we may lose some students that just don't want to travel, whether it be from Richwood or Nicholas County High School to the Career Center. And we may lose some because of the class and the scheduling. I think the concept, and correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but I think the concept was comprehensive high schools now are required to have CTE being applied at the high schools. So something to think about. We're going to be saving $45 million taking it out of the comprehensive plan. Is there a way we can deliver that education? I know the facility is important, very important. The infrastructure is very important to this community. I'm not trying to get on soapbox or speak now, but it's very important to this community. It's very important for economic development at both ends of the county. But I'm buying into the concept that the CTE, there's a lot of students that would benefit from that CTE program. Is there a way to have a delivery system with that extra money? Because that would stay within the FEMA framework now. And we don't really have the need that I am aware of. Now, the problem with taking that savings, Chip, as you and I may have discussed, I don't know if we discussed or not, but the problem with taking that savings is in Summersville Elementary School, which is not a part of the scope of the work, we all recognize that there is a great need there. So we take that savings, and that's not in Plan 1 anyway. But anyway, I just want to make my comment on Plan 1. We don't have a use for the money to improve the Craigsville VOTEC Center, the CTE. I don't know, maybe the architects looked at it. I don't know how much land we have there. I know the building's old, but I don't know how old. I apologize for that. I do not have that information. So there's a lot of questions that would have to be answered if you're going to put that money into Craigsville. And then I realized that equipment and staffing, Mr. Moose, Mr. Berry, teachers and Rick and them, I realize that could be an issue down the road. But if there's a way to deliver that, and we could budget that, I think it's something we should explore. I'll just make that comment.
And Mr. Ferguson, I also have on here, you know, the discussion of if we were to submit this proposal as I presented it before we added your discussion, we would have to be able to detail what renovations or upgrades we would do with those other schools.
Yeah,
So-
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, we would have to itemize what we spend at each facility, or FEMA probably wouldn't approve it. And we have to go out there and look. We've done CEFP for the county.
Okay.
So once we would have to go out there, you're sort of landlocked in your existing facility if you want to add a whole lot
At the
the
Craigs-
current correctional site. I know when we did the elementary school, the site work was pretty expensive because of what what's going on with the water and the dirt out there.
At Richwood?
No, at the Craigsville site.
Oh, I see.
So there's going to be, whatever we add on or change or whatever, it all has to be it has to be program-based.
Right.
What programs you want to add, or if you want to add classrooms or whatever, we're going to have to dive into that and come up with a plan.
So
we can-
the issue's going to be how we spend that money at
Right.
VOTEC, as well as how we spend it at the high school in a detailed plan format. And I think we're a lot of ways from that.
If they allow us to keep the money that was
Don't
intended.
we have 4 acres at Craigsville? Isn't there an additional 4 acres at Craigsville?
So one other additional consideration I'll throw out there, and I'll put my environmental and water hat on for this one. Any land we disturb at a new site that was not previously part of FEMA's environmental assessment will have to go through an environmental assessment because it is a federal funds project, which requires a National Environmental Policy Act evaluation. An environmental assessment would include cultural and historic resources, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, a whole host of arrays of whether or not there are endangered species or potentially endangered species within the area. And I know for both the Glade Creek and the Cherry River side, that took 1.5 years to do for that.
And now on the Nicholas County High School site, where the pods, the temporary pods are at, that FEMA is paying for, I wonder if those studies were done or would be required.
You didn't have a study at the high school because you just had the pods.
So you think they would be required if you were going to
If land is
use part of the scope? Okay.
Unless if we were renovating inside, I'd say probably not.
Correct.
Probably get away without it. If we're adding on something, I would say we have to do that.
Okay.
Same way with the VOTEC.
If we add on
And
to
if
that-
they allow Steve to keep the 42 million that was allotted to VOTEC.
Yeah, let me throw a
They
couple.
need a new roof, correct? I mean, they need a new roof at the VOTEC,
Yes, they do.
for one thing, that's for sure.
Let me throw a couple ideas out. You could combine the middle school and the grade school.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's take one option at a
Yeah.
time. I don't mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but
Oh, you want,
the option that she gave us,
okay.
let's stay on it, because we'll be chasing rabbits all day.
Yeah.
So,
Is there anything else? on
anything
that
else
one? I
on
mean,
one option?
So we know what the restrictions are going to be that. We need environmental study, how to spend the money, basically.
Correct. And if we're spending the money at the existing CTE center and the existing high school, we need a real plan for that. If any of that requires disturbing land, it will require environmental assessment. However, I agree with Ms. Ferguson that if we are within the building and we're not disturbing new land, I don't think that triggers a environmental study per FEMA's guidelines and NEPA's guidelines.
So did, you have a figure on if we just built the middle school?
50.
The middle school itself, we were looking at probably 42 million.
Yeah, 42.
And change, 42.5. And you're looking at, just to build a standalone middle school, you're looking at up to 9 months to design, a month to get all the approvals and all that stuff going on, and 6 weeks to bid it, which leaves us 54 million to spend unless they take it.
Yeah,
Well, they take 42 of it, whatever.
How long to build?
I got the impression that they wouldn't really, and as long as we spend it within the confines of that, but she didn't have much to say other than she'd have to have her lawyers look at it. So they will have the ultimate decision on what it's spent. I'm sorry, did you?
How long did you say it would take?
About 9 months, because you're starting.
To
all
build.
over. Oh, to build, did I have that for you?
No, you don't have that.
You're looking at probably, middle school, typical middle school takes about 18 months, so it could take 18 months to 2 years.
We'd be looking at 2.5 to 3 years. 3 years should be all
And I have additional question for Dave. So within the proposal to only build the middle school at the Glade Creek site, is that contemplating that we would build the middle school per what we said we would do in the 428 agreement for the middle school? Or would we be modifying that further because we would have to detail that?
We changed the programming on the middle school, if you recall, during a year ago.
Okay.
So it would be a typical middle school STEM lab, media center, the whole,
So it would comply with what we've already got approved by FEMA?
It would just be in a different arrangement, because now we're sharing mechanical, sharing stuff with the high school.
And so you shared with a couple of us why we couldn't just cut,
Yeah,
share that with the public.
Currently, you have, right now, you've got one big building with 3 components. So you have a middle school component, the career tech component, and the high school component. They share mechanical systems, they share a kitchen, they share dining areas, they share a few other spaces, but all that's intertwined in one building. If you just lop off the vocational and the career tech and the high school, some of those shared spaces go with that. So you'd have to reorganize all the middle school components. And then the gymnasiums are another thing, all that, the administrative gymnasium issue. You have all 3 gyms combined, and all, if you take away 2 of those, one standalone wouldn't work. You have to reorganize a lot of that. So you're better off just redesigning the middle school if that's all you want out there, is just have a middle school.
That would fit closely to our blueprint that's there. I mean,
You mean the site, you mean the footprint?
yeah,
Yeah, that footprint is big.
right.
So you can have, you can add on that middle school later, we can design it to where you want to add on to it, you can add on to it. But you want to change it where it's a standalone building now, because you've already taken away all the mechanical system at the high school component. So all those things change.
So,
It's
So
not,
that's-
it's not as
that's-
simple as you would think.
all right.
Just cut it loose.
yeah, well, and Steve and I had that conversation a while back before he was ever a board member. He said, why can't you just cut that off? Well,
It was easier to cut off the career tech, or the vocational piece, the heavy vocational piece, because it was a line in the back where we could easily cut that off. But the high school, middle schools are more intertwined with components.
so that's one option you have.
That was to minimum 6,200 standards. That would have to
Currently?
continue. Pardon me?
Currently?
Yes,
Yes.
and it still would stay that way.
Yes. You would have, this 81,000 square feet is what the SBA would build for 544 students. That's the 6,200 right there.
At 85% capacity.
That's their formula. Yeah, they have a formula, however many kids you have in the building versus how much square footage per student, based on, it's different. If you have 300 kids, you get more square footage. If you got 1,000 kids, less square footage. It all works out, believe it or not.
So the last considerations I'll say to the board on that proposal before we move to the second would be that under this proposal, it requires FEMA to allow us to allocate the remaining, we have approximately 97 million remaining, so it would require them to allow us to allocate funds to the middle school and to allow us to provide renovations or upgrades to both the CTE existing center and the existing high school, which those parts specifically fall outside of the 428 agreement. So FEMA would have to make a concession to allow us to use those funds for that. They would also have to allow the concession that we can use the approximately $42 million that was justified for the CTE program for these other items. And the fact that we would not be building a CTE center at a new location, they would still have to give us the okay to use those funds elsewhere. Is there any other comments so I can take them in my notes so that I have them on item 1?
Well, we might want to look, I might want to look into what all we did when we got the, not just an EA, we had to do a couple other things, I think.
Fish and wildlife.
Yeah, but that's in the report, but that's an expense too. I mean, that's a paid report.
Yeah, it's not cheap. So there would be additional considerations for, if we were to have to do an EA at another location, It would be questionable whether or not FEMA would say that we could use our existing FEMA funds for that, or if the board would have to pay for that because they have already paid for one EA. So if this board were to have to foot that bill, that was something we would have to consider from our overall budget that we have for the projects.
And the only comment I would make there is, again, to reiterate that that's the closest, building the middle school, whether it be part of a comprehensive school plan or independently, FEMA would look favorably on because that was the school that was impacted by the flood. So to me, that's your starting point for FEMA. Would you agree or disagree?
No, I completely agree, Mr. Ferguson. This is the option, in my opinion, that is the closest to following the 428 agreement as drafted, because we are committing to spending funds on the 3 areas within the Glade Creek project that we said we would in the original 428. So the middle school gets built, the high school gets some money, even if it's not a new high school, and the CTE center gets some money, even if it's not a new center. So those all fall within what within schools that we said we would touch on within the 428 agreement, even if it doesn't follow exactly what we said. All right. Second option, Mr. Berry, is a K-8 school at the Glade Creek site. So for this, we would build a K-8 school at the Glade Creek project site instead of the middle CTE and comprehensive high school that we proposed in the original scope of work. Per Dave's comments to me earlier this week, we could likely bid this project in July of 2024 and award it for start of construction in August of 24. That gives us 9 to 12 months for a design of this. Again, I think that we would probably work on modifying that CEFP, which would also require closure hearings during the design process. If this were to be the option that the board would to go with, and FEMA were to approve it, we would have to do some closure hearings for a K-8 school. So that would have to be built in to the timeline. I don't know if we could do those within the 9 to 12 month timeline that we have.
Yeah, my only fear is, on that, is those take time. All 3 of those closure hearings are a rather large document. A lot of stuff you have to go through. It's going to require your staff to go through a lot, as well as what she and I would have to deal with. And then the closure hearings themselves, those took, I can't remember how long it took to do all that. We could do a lot of that work concurrently with the design of the project, as long as we thought that the closure hearings would be a positive outcome.
Wouldn't you think that would be risky to design a building before you know that
It's risky.
the closures, before closure hearings occur?
It's risky because you always run the risk of not getting that. And those closure hearings can take 6 months. Because you still have to get state board approval. The SBA would be a rubber stamp. It wouldn't be a big deal for them, but the state board, citizens always go to the state board. And then you have the actual hearing that you have to go through.
Well, no, we've been assured of the cooperation of the state board and the SBA, so they will expedite.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I just want you to know, you always have to go through the state board. And I'm sure the state board would rubber stamp it, and if it's what this board would wish, that's usually the way it goes. But they still have to listen to, when they have a board meeting, they will still have to listen to citizens come and complain. That's just the way it works.
It depends on how many schools you're going to close.
Yeah, that
I would
was
say
my
you
other
have-
question.
you
If you're
have
just
to-
closing Summersville Elementary, it still requires a closure order?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you haven't
Then
done
if you added additional schools to that, each one,
Yeah, and if you want to close 3 schools to help alleviate some of your issues at other schools that you currently have financially, or if you're trying to keep buildings up, you would have to have a closure hearing for every school.
Okay.
Currently, you don't have that at Somersville because we weren't going to do that yet. I don't think that was going to be an issue.
It'll probably take about 6 months, I think, to get the documents together at best.
At best, I mean, it's a long
It's a
process,
long
it's just, you have to do there's all kinds of studies you have to do, bus routes and the whole thing, you have to document everything. It's just a big documentation process.
So I would say that our original estimate of 9 to 12 months to get going, I would push that closer out to 18 months.
You have to add 6 months to it. You've got 9 months of design, so,
Let me ask you this to add to that. I'm a little bit concerned, I'm not against K through 8. I actually went through K through 8 school, Milltown Grade School, and then went on to Richwood High School 9 through 12. And I know Cherry River, correct me if I'm wrong, K through 12, they're all on the same campus. Not against that at all. I am a little concerned about the number of kids. There's probably going to be about 800 kids if you take the middle school, 544 kids. And do you have that number by any chance? Is there 800 or 1,000 kids? So I guess my question is, and it sounds like from a time standpoint, would the better plan not be to build the middle school and then build a K through 5
the number 621 currently.
at,
If you combine, not.
was 544 at the middle school? Now, I know Summersville Grade's got.
No, I'm just talking about if you did a K-8 and you combine 3 elementaries. I thought that's what you were asking.
Well, you're combining them with the middle school.
Well, Summersville Elementary has 389,
Okay.
and the middle school has 544. They don't see each other. It's 2 different schools. They don't share hallways.
The K through 8 is a completely independent school, or is it joined by the
It's
HVAC
the
and
same
the
building,
electrical?
it's the same building, same electric, same HVAC, but the kids don't see each other typically unless you want to have. Typically, parents want their kids separated, their elementary school kids separated totally from the middle school.
Yeah, that was my concern.
So when we do a K-8, you have a separate administration for each school,
Okay,
separate drop-offs.
okay.
And they'll ride the same bus, and the bus will drop off at middle school, then they keep going, and then they drop off at the elementary school.
And I know if it was a perfect world that might make sense. But from a time standpoint and focus of getting these kids out of these pods and into a school system, it's not a perfect world. Would we not be better off building the middle school and building a K through 5 on the same campus and designing it that way versus trying to build a comprehensive plan, because you could go ahead with the middle school while you're trying to do closures and those type of things? Does that not make any sense at all?
Sure, yeah, you could do that, you could have 2 schools on the same campus, that's not a problem, as long as you're going back to, we'd have to look at it, and how big it is. Do you want a K-5 for 3 schools, 1 school?
Yeah,
That's the biggest issue.
and those would be the discussion while you're getting, that's my only point.
I see what you're saying.
But
It's
in
2
separate buildings though, would FEMA let you do that with 2 separate buildings?
I don't know if they're going to let you do a K through 8.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's the.
I mean, it's a great question. It's what, we're going to have to ask FEMA permission for anything we do. I'm looking at time as much as anything.
What capacity are you anticipating, and how much will it cost?
75 million, $75 million. Capacity, you'd have 621 elementary school students and 544 middle school.
933,000 kids.
I'm sorry.
12,000. A
I'm
little bit
sorry.
over 1,000.
He was distracting me.
He was distracting me.
Yeah, you have 621 elementary school, that's three elementary schools, and then you'd have 544 middle school. But keep in mind, they could be separate buildings, they could be combined, but totally separate. We do it however the owner wants to do it, however you want to combine those kids in that building. They have separate play areas, separate everything.
So it would make a difference whether we're going to say Summersville Elementary and Summersville Middle, or bring in
It's a huge
other
difference.
schools.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, Summersville Elementary, currently 389.
Okay, now, what's your 72 million based on?
75
Or
It's based on.
How many schools?
I did it based on all 3 elementaries plus the middle school. I did it based on, 143, it would be 143,156 square feet for 3 elementary schools and 1 middle school. But if you separate them, you'd have a building that is 81,000 square feet for a middle school and 62,000 square feet for the elementary.
Now, is that Summersville Elementary plus two others,
I
or
didn't-
Summersville Elementary plus three?
I just took a stab at 3 elementary schools that are in that close proximity to that site, and it would be Summersville Elementary, Birch River, and Glade Creek. And Birch River, you have 73 students, which is pretty close.
So,
I have 54.
No, I got these from Chris about 2
No,
weeks
there's
ago.
more
No,
than
it's more than
54, there's
54.
70, that's 70.
If it's 54, then that's.
It's not 54.
Well, no, okay, I just have the numbers he gave me.
So
And I just
Marissa-
think we keep in mind that those are gonna be discussions within the communities,
Mhm.
closure hearings, da-da-da. So the more that we can separate the middle school and get those kids out of those pods and get that project started, I just think the better off we are.
and my only caution to that
Okay.
is that we would be presenting a proposal to FEMA that we don't know the outcome of the second part. And I don't know that they would be willing to sign off on a project that may not go through. Because we can go through with the middle school, and that keeps us on track with the middle school part of the Glade Creek project. But the remaining funds are still up in the air, and if these closure hearings take a long time, or we run into an issue, and the project gets scrapped, those funds get taken back by FEMA. We don't get to go back and try again, I don't think. I doubt they're going to give us another couple
Well,
of
that's the
years.
same problem with the first scenario we talked about. We don't have a plan for the 25 million for the VOTEC and 22 million for the high school.
So
Same
when we,
issue. You
but
got
when
to
we
get the
submit
plan.
that, when we submit this to FEMA, we will have a plan.
Yes.
Right now, we're just throwing out ideas.
Yes.
The direction,
Yes.
what direction you
And
want us to.
I'm not saying your plan to go with the middle school and try to figure out the rest while we're doing that is not something that gets proposed. My goal is to tell you is my concerns with that plan,
I understand.
so.
Could we add to that, the 22 million that's left, could we not say that then could also be used at the Nichols County High School and the CTE Center?
So
Divided among them for,
so you're talking about this proposal, K
97 and 75.
gives us 75 million, and we're trying to get to the rest of the 97 million. The additional questions that we had as to those funds is to, well, how many additional professional fees are going to be involved in this project? We are still working on that. Dave is still working on that for his redesign. We don't know what Skanska would charge us for anything additional that they would have to add into their contracts with the board. You know, that's not something that I have. That's something we still have to work out.
This is
So there's a
solid.
question of whether or not that 22 million is available for additional renovations, or if it has to go into this project to cover those professional
And that
fees.
doesn't have the contingency added onto it either.
No, and
well, then let's just say any additional fees will be used for improvement of the CTE Center and the Nichols County High School.
Any additional funds remaining would go to
Yeah.
improvements.
Just like in
If
option
there-
one.
because FEMA won't let you pay for things twice.
Correct.
The good thing so far, the first two options, at least we're not $72 million short. We can take care of.
Don't have to ask for any more here.
Because,
And the second option takes care of Summersville Elementary School, which we know either we pay for it here or we've got to pay for it some other way. We've got to rebuild that.
what they told us the other day was to,
They said they're committed to building schools. That was their number one
FEMA or SBA?
FEMA.
FEMA.
So I'll caution about this one, because while they did say they were committed to building schools, Ms. Tierney also said we're going to try to work within that 428 agreement as much as possible. To me, this plan goes the furthest from what we proposed in the original 428 agreement, because we're getting rid of renovations to the CTE Center, we're not even doing a new CTE Center as we planned, and we're not doing the high school. We're instead putting in 3 schools that weren't included in the scope of work, but we do need the middle school, which is huge, because it actually was lost in the flood. So to me, that's the biggest stray from the 428 agreement, and it might be the biggest stretch for FEMA. Again, we put all proposals in front of them because they said they would consider them. But we need to be realistic in mind. They're going to try to stay within their 428 agreement as much as possible, and they're going to ask us to do the same.
Well, the thing of it is, all these are stretches because it was supposed to be a comprehensive high school with VOTEC. And
Correct.
if you talk about leaving the VOTEC where it is, then that wipes all that out, so.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I'm just saying this one stretches the furthest, but it's not off the table. I don't want it to be off the table. It's on my list. I think we have to present everything and see what goes. I mean, if we submit this as a proposal to FEMA and we get some positive comments back, or they have some suggestions for how we make it a little bit closer, and that's something the board, and they approve off of it, and it's something the board votes on, that's great. My goal here is to advise you guys on my thoughts on how that agreement works.
Yeah, if they say no, they say no.
Correct. And they could say no to all of these.
Yeah, right.
Well, and if they do,
I agree.
I
We've done
don't know
our,
what they want us to do. 'Cause
exactly.
We've begged, pleaded for money from the state, nobody's gave us a dime, so.
This board is doing what it's supposed to do, which is try to present proposals, and we do have to get some relief from FEMA, and I think SBA will work with us. I believe State Board of Education will work with us. We're looking for the relief from FEMA to work within these constraints. So the last proposal I have on my list, before we start talking about additional proposals that I haven't contemplated yet, or they haven't contemplated yet, is to eliminate the CTE program from the Glade Creek project. So what that would do is would mean we would have middle school and basically a traditional high school up there. It would no longer be a comprehensive high school. And we would remove that CTE program and leave it in Craigville. Based on our estimates, that's going to save the board between 40 and 45 million. You would save 45 million if you only had 35 classrooms in the high school. And you would save 40 million if you had 44 classrooms in the high school, which is what the current high school has. So if we were to cut it back down to 35 classrooms, the new high school would actually have less classroom space than the new high school, or than the existing high school. So that's something the board would need to decide on as to how, do we have room for that? Is that a possibility? That all comes into just how much money you save when you're cutting from there.
Now, wait, they currently have 44 classrooms.
No, the
high school.
the building that we were gonna build would have had 44.
That's how many we have in our high
That's me, you
school.
have currently in your high school.
Okay, same thing.
True, they're both.
Yeah, in our current high school, Nicholas County High School, they have 44.
Okay, that's what I
That's
said.
what he said.
But your
That building
proposal
was
is
designed-
35?
So the way that Dave initially did his redesign to take that CTE out, it cut us down to 35 classrooms. We talked about that and said, well, we already have 44. So it's just a dollar amount as to how much you save, but it's something the board, can the board, make it with 35 classrooms for a high school to save an additional 5 million? Or is it worth it to have 44 and figure out the rest from there?
We talked about taking off the whole back part of that building, which was the high bay CTE vocational piece. And we talked after that about we'd have to have back like 9 classrooms to make that equal to what the high school currently has. Because that part of that CTE space in the back had classrooms in it. That was part of each academy having their own group of classrooms.
Would that save a lot of money on the redesign of it, just for you all?
Well, it would save a ton of money on the redesign, because we'd only take about 4 months to do it or less, because we basically just lopped that off, cut it loose, make whatever wall was left an outside wall, and add back 9 classrooms to that.
And
It
then
makes it stay the same.
remodel the existing high school, or just move the elementary into it?
Move the elementary, like we originally.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but that's separate from the scope of work. I'm sorry, I'm only working within that one.
Yeah, that would be part of 3, though.
Part of 3, I mean, I guess, I'm just working within the 428 agreement. I know we have plans for Summersville Elementary, but it's not written in the 428 agreement. So for this proposal, the only thing that I have on here is that we are removing the CTE program from Glade Creek site, leaving it at Craigville as is, and having middle school and a high school.
Okay.
And then I know we have plans for Summerville Elementary, but
Right.
it's not something that FEMA's gonna do.
Well, it's not, yeah, part of their program,
It's
but
the
part of
$2 million
ours.
has been
Yeah.
designated for Somerville Elementary School.
Within,
That was in it.
within the mediated plan, there's $2 million.
Yeah, there's $2 million.
So in the mediated agreement, which I think that's
To
gonna be a
renovate.
state issue, so that's, I think that would be fine. But I'm just talking about FEMA because we've gotten the blessing verbally, we've gotten a verbal blessing from
Yeah.
SBA.
Well,
Problem with this is, how much are we short on funds?
Yep, that's what I'm getting to. So even with this proposal, the board is looking at about a $27 million deficit. The board has looked at its existing funds for this. At max, the board could contribute 10 million of its own funds. However, of that 10 million, it's going to have to go into project redesign as well. So we don't have a real 10 million pushed into that deficit. And again, redesign costs, haven't got a firm number on that. I'd say between 3 million between ZMM and Skanska. That's just me. That's the expert over there on how much it costs. The board could obtain an outside funding of an additional $7.7 million. Again, that's a financial decision of this board. My understanding is that it puts you guys right below being uncomfortable with what your finances are. So we're still facing, even with contributing our own funds and taking out a lease for $7.7 million, this option still faces a $10 to $15 million deficit. The question I have on my paper is whether or not there's additional, can we cut a gym, can we cut anything else to
We talked
this
about cutting
to get that 10 to 15 million off?
Let me ask you a question in regard to that. If you get it up to the same number of classrooms, and you're saving the 40 versus the 45, is there other things in this new design of the comprehensive high school that is less than the current high school, what they have now? And what would those be?
It'd be the auditorium.
Just the auditorium? How much smaller is it?
What's the, I can't remember.
I think it's about 300 seats smaller.
Yeah, I think you currently have 600,
I think it's 700.
600 or 700, and the policy, state policy is, your auditorium only should seat 1/3 of the student body.
I think the current gym seats around 1,000 and some. What about
The gym's fine.
The gym is
Gym's
fine. So
fine.
maybe it's
It's
just,
the other.
I just want to know that there is a difference. We're not comparing apples to apples.
But if you
When we're
reduce it to
figuring
1
that out.
to 2 gyms instead of 3, that's going to be
If
different.
you reduce it to 2 gyms, the thought was that you could use the gym at the current high school and the new high school.
So if you do reduce it to 2 gyms and take that out of there, right now there's a gym at the middle school, 2 gyms at the high school, so you would be changing that scope of work also.
Yes.
Just want to make that clear that
So of the 3 listed, I have this as the second best proposal for complying with the 428 agreement as drafted. However, it is the option that we still have a deficit on. So that's an issue.
And that's soft costs, that's not even
Yeah.
counting all the other
Yeah.
stuff, so you're probably 30 million short,
Not that much.
25?
Now, are these, I know they're estimates and stuff, but are the estimates for building and equipment, FF&E, soft, or, okay, so it's turnkey, you can get the kids in school? Correct.
So those are the 3 proposals that I have on my list that have had floated around before. Happy to talk, we can go back to each of these and discuss additional proposals for them, or we can go into new proposals and discuss the same type of information that we need to obtain for those proposals.
Well, I'd like to revisit one thing, and I discussed it, and I know it's new, maybe we should look at it, maybe it's not even worth looking at. Maybe Terrence and some of the educators, Donna could comment on it. Is there a way to keep the CTE program, do away with it at Craigsville, and have a CTE program at both high schools?
Honestly, it's not feasible.
Well, that answers my question.
I can tell you, I mean,
That can answer my question.
there's a lot of counties that try that. The issue has always been staffing, and then you end up with different programs at different high schools, and you ultimately have students at one high school want to go to the other high school, and they can't do it, or you can't provide transportation, or they don't have transportation. So it's very difficult. to
Okay.
do.
Okay, that answers my question, I just wanted to.
Just from past experience in other counties I've worked in, it's extremely difficult.
So it's, even though you may lose part of your student population by doing it at Craigsville that don't want to do the travel, and you got the travel time, and those kids are out of class, it's still more cost effective or to implement it that way.
Right, usually it's more cost effective because it's hard to find instructors.
Yeah, I get it.
I don't know why you're saying lose your, man.
Some kids won't go to won't go to Craigsville.
Well, they're full right now, I mean.
Well, I know, but you have some kids, I'll use my daughter, for example, who was in graphic design, would love to use the graphic design that's out at Shop Now, but her scheduling at Nicholas at the time she took it, this is 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you'll lose some population that'll make the decision based upon their other scheduling, but it's right there at school, it's a whole different thing. That's just my opinion. That's why I'm saying you
But
will
a
lose
lot
some
of
of
that,
your
a lot of
population.
that was worked out. A lot of that's been worked
I
out.
mean, Don's telling me
It's
I'm
still-
correct, you're
it's
going to
still
lose some of
true.
your population. You'll lose some of your population. I'm not saying a lot, and kids still have a choice, and I agree with what Dave was saying, I thought about that. If you had certain programs at Richwood, certain programs at Nicholas, you have a kid that wants to take one at Richwood, we have an open county thing, so they can go, but you can be looking at transportation costs and more time on the bus. But keep, and even if you don't lose any part of your population, you are busing kids, whether from Richwood, Nicholas, Natty, wherever, you are busing kids that, versus if they have VOTEC right in the school, you are losing class time. You know, the education system, we've got to figure out a way, some way, and I don't know what that is, that's, we've got to figure out a way to make it more exciting for the kids, and that they'll want to be in school, and that they'll want to do these things. The concept, I think, was good. Now, the delivery method, how you're going to deliver that is what I'm trying to work out, but I won't beat a dead horse. It sounds like that's not an option. It's better to just keep it at Craigsville.
The only thing,
And I'm fine with that, you
the
know.
only thing I'm looking at is that vocational center where it is right now.
Right.
They're doing very well.
Best of the state.
One of the best in the
Well, they're
state.
doing very well because Donna helped them and because they bought in the idea that more of what they do needs to be tied to the high schools. And I'm afraid we're gonna lose that.
Let me ask you a question on this, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds or whatever, but it's not, am I right or wrong that all ninth graders are required to go to VOTEC?
They are not required.
Okay, not required, because, you know, I've heard that too, so they're not required to go. Okay.
They're not required, what's their option?
They are not required to go. If they choose to go, it's in their schedule. If they opt out, they don't have to go. It's not a requirement. There is no
My
board
granddaughter
policy.
didn't have a choice. She didn't want to go to Weldon. But,
Well,
so
apparently.
there are,
That's just that short, that
Yeah,
little short
it's-
window that they go,
there is-
visit every little class.
Yes,
a few
they're,
days
they're
away.
absolutely not required. to
I
go.
understand the exposure part of it, you should be exposed to it, not arguing that part. I was just asking when the numbers and stuff, the term completers. I mean, I don't know what you're saying when we're the best in the state. Are you saying from completion, number of people graduating?
Skills USA, it is one of the best centers. When I first started, we had 106 students at that facility. We have 450 right now. And that's because I had a vested interest in making it work. That's why that board had a vested interest in career technical education. That's what drove it. We made schedules change. We required to give students the opportunity, and they created a program in ninth grade to provide exposure to students. Students who chose not to attend did not have to attend. So that's why.
That was why we originally had a comprehensive plan, was to get those kids, get that vocational into the high school and where the kids are.
Well, it would be nice, but we're $72 million short. I keep bringing that up, so we've got to look at other things.
We have an option for,
No.
Can I-
If you have one, yes.
yeah. Put the vocational and the high school at Clay Creek, and elementary and the middle at the high school down here.
And when you say elementary, you're meaning only Summersville Elementary? Or are you meaning the 3 schools that we discussed earlier?
Just Summersville.
Just Summersville.
All three.
That's what I was thinking.
Well, you're not saving any money though. Are you taking the middle school out of the comprehensive plan and putting it at the high school too?
Yes.
'Cause I've heard that, okay.
Yes.
I've heard that one. He's actually taking the middle school and the elementary and putting it at the current high school.
How much would that save you there?
Well, that takes some figuring out. But, I mean, it's just a,
You would save,
We could go rebuild the whole high school.
no, I don't think so. It would work with middle school the way it is, and
We're gonna add the elementary and the middle to the high school without,
In the old high school?
in the old high school.
yeah, without changing the size of the school.
I don't think you'd have to change it that much.
It's a pretty big high school.
Yeah.
That school was designed for about 1,000 kids. I
Yeah.
think the number of kids actually does work out.
Your capacity is under the 85%. So you're drastically underutilizing the building. I think that's what came out of the city. We don't have Whitney, but,
What we have to realize is no matter what we do, if you put the middle school in the high school, middle school teachers will be mad because they didn't get a new building. I'm just pointing out, I'm just telling you what you're gonna hear. Of course, the high school teachers, they've told us over and over and over, they wanna stay, they don't want less than what they have, they'd rather stay in their building. And I know that's not 100%, but it's a high number.
And another thing we're gonna face is, a former board member said in a public meeting that they were not gonna close elementary schools, they were not gonna consolidate elementary schools into the high school. That would not be done. When I said that was a possibility, because there was such a capacity at the high school that moving just one group in there would leave an immense amount of space. And then the public's gonna say, well, what happened to that? Why are you doing that?
Yeah, there's gonna be questions on anything.
Well, the problem with that, I'm gonna go back, from my standpoint, keeping you focused on getting those kids out of those pots. And not the easiest, but the quickest way to do that is to build a new middle school. If you gotta build a new high school in Votech out there, those kids are still gonna be in those pods until you switch them over to the high school. I don't know why you would want to take a high school that's functioning and working. I know if it's under capacity, I don't know why you would want to do that. That's just my personal opinion. I would leave that one alone.
and I hear that, you might be, and again, floating ideas, you might be able to do the renovations to the existing high school to accommodate the elementary and middle school while the construction at Glade Creek is ongoing, so we can get them in the same, so it's on the same timelines. Now, I don't know.
How would you do that with the kids in the high school?
it depends on what.
Phasing.
Just
On-
phasing.
on how you-
If you're underutilized, you can move kids around.
Okay.
Just an idea. I don't
No,
know how
no,
that-
we're talking about ideas.
I won't pretend to be
I love ideas.
I won't pretend to be an engineer.
Yeah, I love ideas.
We're just looking at possibilities.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
so,
And
So, Mr. Berry, his point is well taken. It should be an option.
I think it's an option.
I just don't know the dollars amount
Right.
today. I know you were putting your pencil to it.
So if you combine if you take off the middle school component and you put a high school CTE center out there only, you're approximately 239,000 square foot building, and that's $112 million, and you're about $15 million short.
So I get to know.
Without renovation to the high
Yeah,
school.
you don't have any money for that.
And my question comes back into, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but these discussions have to be made because time obviously is of an essence on all this thing too, is if you are going to do the comprehensive high school out there, how are you going to do, and keep the comprehensive so you have the CTE program, what's going to be the delivery method, and if it's not going to be the delivery method, that we were looking at, if we were going to go to a more traditional setting, how is that going to affect cost, time, everything? I don't know.
But if you change the delivery method, you're basically scrapping everything you've done and starting over. So it's.
Well, that's something I think the new superintendent needs to, because he'll be the one making the recommendation, I would think, way I understand it, how we're going to deliver the education system.
Dave, on those numbers for the high school and the VOTEC, if you put it there, were you counting kids that come over from Richwood?
I counted I basically looked at the square footage yes, because I basically looked at the square footage we have currently. That's just a guesstimate, but, we would have to, those students are included in this square footage for the high school and the CT.
That's our option, I guess, unless somebody else has other options.
So the things that I want you to keep in mind from a legal perspective, and I'm not saying that any of these things can't be changed through negotiations, is that anything that falls outside of the 428 agreement has to be specifically approved by FEMA. Aside from specifically approving it, they have to agree that they won't take the funds back that were obligated for those items. So those are big considerations, and FEMA knows that. We've expressed that to them as of Tuesday. They know that that's what we're going to be asking them to consider. So I'll ask you all to consider that. You also need to consider anything you do is all public. So there's always the possibility of a lawsuit, and I always warn all my clients about that. So anything we do, public scrutiny, there could be a lawsuit. But that could happen regardless of whether or not we had to do this. So that's on the table as well. And then we just want to keep in mind that while SBA and the Board of Education have stated verbally that they support us 100%, and I don't have any reason to believe they won't keep their word, I don't have any of that in writing. So we know we're in an election year.
You lawyers like everything in writing.
I love it to be in writing. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
And you still litigate it.
I said this to a couple of you on Monday. If it's not in writing, I'm going to tell you it didn't happen. So.
Well, and I've heard those rumors about citizens going and filing an injunction, and the only thing I can tell them is all they're doing is putting their schools farther and further down because we do not have the money.
And I completely agree. All I'm doing is
unless somebody walks in here and gives us $72 million, we cannot follow that agreement.
I agree.
So there's got to be some changes, and that's what we're looking
There has to be some
at.
changes, and this board is doing what it needs to do to keep this moving. Like you said, the board does not have $72 million to keep the plan as is. These are our options, and we're following them.
Yeah.
We have to have some assistance from FEMA.
And Marissa, you make a good point because you said keep the process moving. You want to talk about milestones a little bit?
Yes.
And you heard them get after us because we didn't have a backup plan. And I said all along when I was elected that I would follow the mediate agreement until we hit a wall. We hit a wall.
And I will state for those in attendance, they wanted to talk about backup plans. We brought this issue to their attention as of March 10th, 2022. Before this board changed, before the elections. On March 15th, we submitted specific questions to FEMA and SBA to be answered about whether or not these agreements could be modified. The unequivocal answer was no at that time. The FEMA and SBA and EMD reaffirmed that in a public meeting before this board in June of last year, that those agreements could not be modified. So we've asked the questions before, we were told no. We did have options to change. We did it within what we were told we could do. So we submitted a scope of work change to cut down the cost of both Cherry River and Glade Creek last June. It was approved in July of last year. And that's us working within those agreements because at that time we were told we could not amend. We have now officially hit the wall. And we had to go back to them and ask the same question. So I think they are now at least listening to potentials to modify the agreement, which is good, whereas before it was written down. Again, like it in writing. They wrote it down and said, no, you couldn't change it. They are now at least agreeing to listen. They haven't agreed to let us change, but they're agreeing to let us listen. And that's all this board can do.
And she's the one that said, you know, there were a lot of factors, the
It's the inflation. it's
inflation cost, the things that are hard to get.
Material shortages.
Right.
You know, it's affecting everything across the country and not just West Virginia. You know, this is a post-COVID world is completely different from when these proposals were made pre-COVID.
And she was shocked that we only had one bidder.
Correct. So I think that we've enlightened them to the issues we're facing. And this is, the board is doing what they are supposed to be doing to try to keep this moving. There is no delays that I can see that this board is taking on their own to delay these projects.
Any proposal that we put together for FEMA, formal proposal that the board votes on, and you said multiple proposals is okay to put down there, and Mr. Moose, which I agree with, said, you know, we can prioritize those. The only thing that I would recommend, and we're doing that, especially today, and our planners and stuff, is future boards will be looking at this down the road, and we've got a campus out there, and we spend a lot of money on preparing that property. So if you do whatever plan you come up with, whether it's to build a middle school, or build a K through 8, or build a comprehensive high school, I think we need to make sure that we don't mess that property up. Because you could start out and build this, and maybe down the road the money does become available. And you build a CTE, or you build a comprehensive high school. So we need to keep the placement of those buildings and the flow of the traffic and everything. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that, Dan? I mean, just be very cautious that we got a lot of property and a lot of money in, that we want to develop it in a way that those things could happen. You could have fields and state. Nobody knows what's going to happen 40 or 50 years down the road. Well, a few times.
I think that's kind of why we.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the confidence, but I'll be the first to tell you, my dad was the visionary. My dad was a very smart man, didn't have a lot of education behind it, but he was a pretty smart man, and he was the visionary. I was just kind of the doer, but I appreciate that comment. But he did teach me that. Our drainage, you know, how you put those in, all that stuff. We got to not just take it for what we're building, we got to figure that out, or what could happen down the road and in the future for future boards. I just how.
Well, yeah, we put a lot of money in fields there, and there will be ready to turn. And you just let that lay there, you know, that's a big waste.
I understand.
I mean, if you don't have a
I understand.
school there to use it.
These are all considerations the board has to consider, because at the end of the day, whatever's proposed, this board has to vote on. Whatever you decide is the proposal you submit for approval, and it has, you all have to be comfortable with it. You have to be comfortable with it for the students in Nicholas County, so.
But let me understand, we're actually going to vote on several proposals, and then we're going to get FEMA's comments. So
Correct.
FEMA may, at the end of the day, pick that proposal for us.
They may combine two of them.
So don't present something you can't live with if FEMA does it. And we just say, well, okay, FEMA approved that, but we still want to change it. I mean, we've got to really think about that when you propose it, that you can live with it, because FEMA may choose that for us, not us.
You're right, we may submit 4 proposals, and only one of them is even potentially feasible for them.
But like you said, you will prepare the proposals, bring them to us, and then, okay.
Correct.
And we'll-
This is just a working session. I'm going to put it into a formal submittal for everyone to review all the proposals and make sure you're again comfortable with them, comfortable with what we're proposing, comfortable with the numbers that are in them, and then you'll vote on submitting the proposals to FEMA for review and comment. And then after we have a meeting with FEMA at the end of July, which is when they suggested they could get back to West Virginia to speak with us, we'll get their feedback, and then this board will be in the process of making its decision, if one can be made based on the feedback we get back.
I thought we were going to meet with them as a work session
That's what we're
in
doing.
end of July, and then they would come back, I'm assuming in August, and say yea or nay.
Well, we're gonna send them the proposals ahead of time, so they can tear them apart.
Correct.
And then they were going to come back and work with us through that.
You're right, that's what's gonna happen. I apologize, misspoke for that. We're going to submit them. because it takes the federal government far longer than it needs to do anything. They're going to come to us at the end of July, having reviewed it, hopefully, have significant comments and questions for us. I would hope at the end of that conversation, we would be able to answer all their questions in person, to be able to say, these are the proposals we have. But if not, we'll answer their questions, get approvals from there. But it's the same process. We're going to submit proposals, hopefully by the beginning of July. We will have a working session with FEMA at the end of July. And then hopefully from there, we will have a much condensed timeline as to when we can actually select a proposal by this board.
And, you know, we can do the best we can
Yeah,
in all this.
right.
And it comes time to bid again. We don't know what that bid's gonna be. You know, we might be in the same place we are right now.
Well, the quicker we can get it done,
Yeah, but we're gonna budget this, with that in mind. So we'll, instead of, you know, this came in at 479 square foot, we're gonna budget it at 550 or 525.
So you're gonna,
We're gonna have to.
Wasn't Herbert Hoover, did y'all do, does ZM
No,
do
but somebody
Herbert
called
Hoover?
the office the other day about that, and I did some research.
And we didn't do it. I had asked, yeah, I know what they did, so, because the article said it was a different architect firm, and then they told me it was an
Yeah.
architect firm.
The
What was their square footage? It was 186, and I think their cost was 54 million, so it's like 290.
Their, where's my cheat sheet here? I did some research on that.
Okay.
And got all the numbers, because I knew it would be asked. Okay, Herbert Hoover came in, they did, it's 185,000 square feet, but that includes a bunch of exterior buildings. Okay? They have to date spent, their square foot cost for everything. And that was, the building was bid in 2020. The site work was bid in 2018. Site work cost $19 million. They had built a road,
They had
and they
big
basically
field.
leveled the mountaintop and did all that. Their building cost $67.8 million. And that ended up being $329 a square foot. And if you do the math, at 40% or 45% inflation, which is what we've had since 2020, it ends up being $477,
I'm sorry, what was your inflation percentage?
45%.
Yeah, I'm not
So
faulting
if you
anything,
do-
the cost are.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
comparing,
Yeah.
but basically,
That's
if
what's
we would have
happening.
bid our building, it would have cost $300 a square foot too, in 2020. But if we did the 45% inflation on 329, it ends up being 477, and our building costs 479. So it's, if you want to do the apples to apples kind of thing. We experienced 45%, and the SBA is budgeting or expecting on all their projects anywhere from 35 to 45% inflation over the last year, 6 months, on all their projects. And that's how they're approaching all their needs projects. They're all coming in between 35 and 45%, depending on the size of the
For
building.
whatever reasons, these delays have been expensive to this
It's
county.
everything. It's, you know, the 45%, it's workforce. There's no workforce out there. Masonry has gone up twice. Roofing projects have, you know, before 2020, they were $9 a square foot. We could nail them every time. Now, we did one the other day, it came in at $51 a square foot. We're taking the rubber off and putting it back down. That's all we're doing.
So there is your 72 million. I mean, basically,
It's-
it is the inflation. I mean, I don't debate that at all.
And
It's a shame we didn't get it
There's
built.
material
quicker, but we didn't.
shortages, electrical panels, it takes over a year to get. We opened the building 6 months ago, and they had to go rent panels to open the building. They weren't rented. It's just different. It's a different animal.
Let me ask you a question that, from the last board meeting, Mr. Busak made a comment on it. I started thinking about, I was reading Herbert Hoover, and if I understood him right, they, like 400 and some, it may have been, maybe my memory's wrong, I read it wrong, 400 and some geothermal wells
Probably, I don't know, I don't know. the
How many
number, but
wells are we going to dig, and what's the cost of that? And will that shrink if we shrink the footprint?
Well,
Or does it, is it an
now-
immaterial amount?
Oh, no, it's the wells are based, the number of wells are based on a lot of things. Your rock strata and your earth strata, plus the size of your HVAC system.
Okay.
So I don't know if I would spend the money if we're just gonna build a middle school out there.
That was my point.
You
I
could
didn't
save
know what was
yourself
already
$4 or $5 million
scheduled to drill or not.
by not doing geothermal. But I don't know how many wells they did, and I can't remember how many wells we had in our.
Okay.
I can't remember that. I could go look.
But I read that Herbert Hoover article, I was surprised at that number of wells. I'm sure it's 400.
But it also
If we
depends-
change our building scope, we may want to look at that.
Well, it also depends on how deep they had to go. You know,
Yeah, they had to go pretty, 135 feet, something. No, maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was 135 wells and 460 feet.
Well, I
That
can
makes
tell you
sense.
that nothing within the 428 plan specifically says anything about wells. That's all just design.
Yeah, that's all.
So that's not anything that we have to take out of the scope of work.
Okay, so what we have, 4 plans?
I'm sorry, 296 wells at Herbert Hoover, 450 feet.
We really only have 3 plans.
Yeah.
Because we talked about, we keep the CTE programs at both high schools, it's not feasible. And then the CTE in high school at Lake Creek, it's $112 million just to do that with no renovations to the high school to make it Summersville Elementary and Middle School, so that's way over budget as well.
So it's number 3, wasn't it?
So, right.
You got middle school.
Number 3 is also over budget by approximately 10 to 15 million.
So really, the only 2 options that are, that we have the money for are build a middle school, spend some money at Lake Creek, spend some money at Nicholas County High School, or,
I'm sorry, I'm going to correct you. Spend some money at Craigsville.
what did I say?
You said Lake Creek.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Or the second one, which is to build the K-8, which is going to take a little more time with the closure hearings and all that.
It will take more time, it's a new redesign, closure hearings. We're pretty close if we have professional fees that come into that to using all of our 97 million on that. So we might have a little bit of funds that we can put somewhere else if he wants us to keep them for high school or CTE renovations, but the majority of that would go into the K-8.
Well, I think that should be number 1. And if they say no, then number 2,
What do you think?
K through 8, K through 8.
Let's let her get all the particulars together, submit them to us,
Yeah.
and how much time do you need?
Well, for the second proposal, if we're listing it second, I need this board and Mr. Ferguson, to decide how we want to spend the money on renovations at CTE Center and high school, because that will have to be in the proposal. So if I can get those, I can have these done.
You want to have all the math, all the figuring, all the math and fees and everything, when you look at them? Because I'm going to have to add stuff to every one of those. If you want to send them to me and I'll add my portion to it, and then I can come up and look at the Career Tech Center and see what we want to add, if you all want to add anything at all.
So how much time will it take you to do?
Well, if it involves all those studies, it takes 1.5 years. We'll just renovate it instead of add on.
That would be
Well,
my
that's-
suggestion anyway.
Yeah, but you're gonna have money. Do you remember when they said in the beginning, they talked about, FEMA talked about if there's money left over, you can pretty much spend it on whatever you
Just
want.
do a change in the scope of work.
Changing the scope of work.
Well, we don't have that problem.
No, well, if we're
If
just
you do that plan, you
renovating,
may.
but if we're just renovating and not adding on to Career Tech Center, we can't spend $20 million doing that. I don't know what we-
So,
Well,
again, very bad news. The agreement says that if we have money spent over after we complete the scope, the agreed on scope of work, then we can, we are completely, we would be assuming that when we modify these agreements, that they would still hold to that, because we're not completing the original scope of work. So it is also a question, with many question marks as to whether or not, if we have anything left over, when we modify this substantially, whether they would let us use that money.
Is the foundation such at the Career Center, if you, is there any portion of it that would maybe lend itself to having a second story added to it?
We have to look at it.
I mean, that may be if you're talking about, expenditure of funds, because they're out of space. So if there's even a certain section, it wouldn't even have to be the entire facility if you could add.
We looked at it.
Well, the thing about that, sinking your money up there is, are you gonna get the kids there after you do it? We've had that trouble,
It's going to depend on your administration
Since they
and the
built that
importance they
building.
put in it.
you know,
It's going to depend on your administration and the importance.
it was always underused because it wasn't in the high schools.
I would make one recommendation. I've been told no 100 times, and I'll probably be told no again. But I don't know how you do it, and maybe it's not the FEMA. And if the extra design fees and stuff are out of scope and they won't pay for it twice, I would ask the SBA in the state of West Virginia, as part of this deal, to pay for our redesign fees. I would ask for a grant or some money. I don't know how you do that, but I would ask.
I think that's a good suggestion.
They're called, they're supposed to be a partner in this. I know they're not putting anything in it, but I'm not afraid to go and ask.
Well, I mean, they've said no 10 times.
That's what I'm saying. Well, they said no to, FEMA did to the money, and the SBA has said, no, we're not putting any more money in.
Yeah, but the governor's
But-
office has said no. to the
But if we
money.
can get FEMA to agree for the changes, and maybe SBA to get those changes done and then get off the hook, maybe they'll have a grant for us. I'm just saying,
I think it's a good idea.
I would ask.
And when you come back with these, we'll have a more solid amount.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my whole point. I think if we send something to FEMA, I don't want to send them with question marks about money. I want them to know how much things will cost.
Yeah.
Well, that entire sewer system, the drainage in Nicholas County High School needs to be redone.
Yeah.
And I know that's got a few million on it. I mean, it all needs to be redone.
We weren't planning on doing a whole lot, but that was the major portion.
That's the major portion of the work. Yeah, it's
And will
really-
you be going to the schools and asking them what they think they need?
I don't know if we'll have to go ask the schools what they need. I think we'll ask the principal or and talk to Tom about if he has to renovate that building out there, what would he do? That kind of, those kind of meetings need to happen.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it needs to happen quickly if we're going to get this in. I think FEMA's going to require a couple of weeks. They probably won't look at it until after the 4th of July. So she indicated that she put that off because of vacations. I mean, I can do my part now. And these guys want to see it before we send it. So when's your next board meeting?
Well,
Whenever you're ready.
Did you have one scheduled in July 1st or around?
July 3rd.
July 3rd is our first meeting in July, and that's when we need to send this on to FEMA and give them 2 or 3 weeks to tear it apart.
Well, if you vote on it that day.
You
or
will vote on
something.
July 3rd, we'll have it July 3rd.
Yeah, you can vote on it, or vote on it with these suggestions, and I can make them in a day, the revisions, the written revisions.
I'll get my work done by July 3rd.
You've got a board meeting on the 19th.
Well,
That's probably pushing it.
They recommended that we send several options. They recommended that we send several
He
options.
did. I also recommend several options.
Oh, yeah.
So are you gonna send all those proposals or only 2 of them?
That'll be up to us, Mr. Perry.
Yeah.
And the thing of it is, when we send them, we better be able to live with them. Is what you- So if we send something, if we say, oh, we're just gonna build what we have, we know we're 72 million short, and we can't. do
Well, we
that.
know we're not gonna build that.
But
That's
you know
why
what
we
I'm
have these
saying.
options.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We don't want one of these options that's way high.
Yeah, if you're gonna send an option that we're $27 million short, you better have a plan to get to 27.
You better have the plan to get the money, and
You got two plans that we're not short. You got other plans that we're still a little
But
short.
those
but
two
they're-
plans are way out of the scope we started with those.
the first one,
With the middle school,
I think
just
that's
middle
what
school.
you're working on.
That's-
And I will be in 3 days max, but I am gonna be out of the state the last week of June, but I can get it done, so.
Well, can we do it, can we submit it the week after? Week of the month?
I can get it, if I can.
I'm gonna
get
be
it done.
gone, I'm at the superintendent's conference, 4 days.
Yeah.
That's 19, 20, 21, 22nd. Not that I can't work there, but.
I mean, I'm in, we're discussing schedules, I'm in trial next week, so next week I can't start on it. The following week while you're at superintendent's, I can do my part, send it to me. I am on vacation the last week of June, but I can get it done by the meeting on July 3rd.
what if we chose to put this out to the public and, like, public comments and let them make suggestions? Is that crazy or what?
I don't think it's crazy, because they're gonna be the ones that vote on the next levy that comes up, or the bond that you have to build a grade school.
Just put it out to the public, didn't we? Red light on back there.
Yes.
That's not I mean, I can give you legal advice in conference in an executive session, but that's your guys' decision.
Try to be one.
Well, there has to be closure hearings in the event that one of these is adopted, so the public will certainly have input if there's closure hearings.
Well, if it went that route.
Yeah.
I just think the more buy-in they have, the better off you are.
That's the code.
And, there's still people out there that, I got an email this morning, please build what was agreed upon. Well, give us the 72 million and we'll do that. But I don't know what they're not hearing. We don't have the money.
Right.
I mean, if you want to put it out to public comment and still submit it on the 3rd. we
That
don't
would be
have time-
tough,
We
isn't
don't
it?
have time for that.
Yeah, that's something. I mean, how long would you put it out for public comment?
Maybe that's a dumb idea.
That was a smart idea.
I'm just saying, we don't have time to do it before July 3rd.
I think we're going to hear public comment. What?
Oh, I've been hearing public comment.
Yeah.
But they don't hear that we don't have the money. That's what I don't understand. It's in the paper, it's on the TV. We do not have the money. So we have to do something different.
Yeah.
And doing nothing's not an option.
No, we can't sit
For
here.
several reasons. Number one, we gotta get those kids out of those pods. But the other reason is, we got some milestones with FEMA.
Right.
If you don't get, you're gonna de-obligate all this money.
Right.
Even the money we spent, and we don't have the money to pay it back.
There's not one member on this board that is not here for kids. We want the kids out of the pods and in the schools.
That's right.
On both sides of the county. Mr. Bean? You have anything to say?
No, but the one thing, feel like I've been cramming for an exam, the last, all day. I spent the day with Donna. We talked a lot about this project and where we were with it. And, there's a lot of good ideas out there. There's a lot of speculation out there. One thing that Steve said that I 100% agree with is we got to get these kids out of these pods as quick as we can. I mean, if we have all these delays and have to run all these blessed reports and all this kind of stuff, we're going to be sitting here years from now still trying to explain to people why we haven't got started. So I think that, I have to really think about the 3 proposals that I'm aware of and really try to wrap my head around which one I think is actually the best. But, because I really like what Roy was talking about for K-8, that's one of the first things I thought about. But then again, that causes us delays, which I'm not sure we can afford at this point. So, it's a tough situation. We all know it's a tough situation. We all know we're trying to do it for the right reasons. And, we need that. I've asked the people who reached out to me, and only about 200 so far, to just be a little bit more patient, because we're just getting our ground legs here and trying to learn exactly where you are. Like I say, Donna, I spent maybe 3 hours in her office, and I felt punch drunk after I got out of there.
I'm sorry.
No, but it was informative of things that I was not aware of, because when I've been in Pocahontas County, I've been worried about Pocahontas County. I haven't been spending a lot of time following this because I've been too busy with my job.
We hang out at conferences together, but we
That's
don't talk
it.
about all
Yeah.
that.
But, you know, I think we have some really good people on this board that's looking after our kids, and that's always encouraging when you have that.
Kristen, you haven't said a word.
Were you gonna look at, if you're looking at that K through 8 option, Steve had mentioned maybe separating that? Was that, did you say that that was feasible or no? Could
Yeah,
that
you can
get the
separate
middle
it.
school kids in there faster?
If FEMA will go for that.
We can put that on there as a fourth option, as a K-8. It's a K-8 option, but it's a
K-5 and
K-5
6-8.
and then 6-8. Separate buildings, completely separate buildings.
So we can just get started. Is there any purpose for that?
Get middle school completely finished. I mean, they can, if somebody else bids on the other one, but, yeah.
Well, if they're going to have separate administrations, I get building them in one building, and I will make a public comment too. We've been told that elementary schools are a little cheaper to build than high schools.
Oh, just in the high school, yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, so that's where some of the savings should come in.
And so, wait, you want to go back, you want separate buildings, right?
Well, I think that should be an option, because we could go ahead and get started on the middle school while we're dealing with closure orders and everything through a K through 5. That was my point. Just for speed.
I'll put it on.
Do you have to have separate kitchens, separate?
Yeah, I know, so the cost would definitely be higher, I get that. But we have enough room that if we're gonna spend the money anyway, or maybe lose with FEMA, or have to find another place to put it, I think it's an option we should explore. For speed, just for time.
To get the kids out.
Get the kids out of those pods. That's what I hear in the community. I haven't followed this a lot. The people I hear, it's not all this other stuff, and I know, and I agree with you, Chip, they're not hearing the cost part of it. But it's been too long.
Well, that was brought up to me today. They said, stay with the plan and get these kids out of the pods. Well, if we stay with the plan, the kids aren't gonna get out of the pods.
No,
We don't have the money.
We don't have to.
And they're not hearing that. They're not reading. And Ray put it in the paper, and it's in the Charleston Gazette, it's been on the WCHS, and I don't know.
But a lot of the people are upset, and we know we're not gonna please everybody, no matter what we end up doing. But I really believe that if you get those kids out of those pods and into a school, a good school and a good facility, that the majority of the people in this county, the silent voter, whatever thing, will be very pleased. I think that should be our number one priority, to get them out, and I know it is, but I think get them out and get them out the most time-efficient way we can. And I know we have these other things to think about as far as the money. I get all that, but I'm just telling you, if we stay focused on that, I think we'll be all right at the end of the day.
So, Marissa, you're gonna email that to us after you,
Yes, I will put it into what I consider to be a final work product, and submit it to you guys.
and so we'll take action on that on July 3rd.
Mr. Beam, do you have Mr. Beam's email address?
I do not.
I need to make sure you get that.
TBEAM @K12.wv.biz.
Dave, if you can get it to me, I don't know, how- if you can get it to me by the 23rd, I can have it
I'll figure it out.
turned around.
23rd. Okay.
And we appreciate both of you all. And I don't know if I said at the beginning of the meeting, but there were rumors out there that we were having this meeting at 2:30 in the afternoon so that the public couldn't join. And the first thing I did when I became president of this board was change the starting time from 5 to 6 so that more people could participate. That was one of the things I asked to change. I am not trying to hide anything from the public. The only reason we had this at 2:30 was because that's when our lawyer was available and our architect. That's the only reason. I have stuff to do. I could have been going too, but anyway. Anything else? Well, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Booth makes a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Mr. Green. All in favor? Aye. At 4:12.